guys ever feel lonely? Raise your hand if you sometimes feel lonely. Keep your hand up, and you can put down your hand if you feel that your loneliness is too often. It's just, that stays on you, if you raise or you hold the hand. For me, I remember very vividly that moment that actually changed my life. That was the time before we didn't have WhatsApp, Facebook messengers, we didn't have Skype, we didn't have any cheap airlines like EasyJet and Ryanair's, and the email even was not a huge case. I studied in Switzerland for 3 years, and the communication with my home, with my friends, was most of the time with handwritten letters. Do you ever write handwritten letters? Seldom, very seldom. That was the best moment when I came back home from the university. I lived in a guest family, and every time I saw a letter on the stairs, I got like my blood pumping, like the dopamine rush, the serotonin, oxytocin, all the happy chemicals pumping up. The same thing that happens right now when you open the Instagram and you see those hearts. The same thing. The only problem, it happened like once in 2 or 3 weeks. So very, very seldom. And I felt lonely, although I had some friends and everything, but I somehow felt that I am missing something. This was the fear of missing out. Even before that was a term, this FOMO. I experienced that like in 1997. So at some point I decided it's too much, I'm coming back home. Although everybody said to me, you know, it's stupid. You are studying in Switzerland, right? So really good place to be. But this feeling of being lonely was too much that I just came back home. And didn't finish, I quit, like Steve Jobs. But I also like the feeling of being abroad, learning new things, new people, and so like that. So at that moment, I actually decided, when I grow up, when I get my own family, when everything's gonna be great, I got my kids, I want to go somewhere abroad and live again for several years. So my dream, my wish came true, and I got an opportunity to go to Dubai. Again, the place where rich people live. And I went there with my whole family. I lived there for 2 years. This is my family. But the problem was that this business condition, I got a partner there to set up the business, to get things running. I had to spend there like 6 or 7 months alone again. But at that time, I just decided, okay, right, we have WhatsApp, Messenger, Skype, emails, cheap airlines, let's do that. So I went there, lived there. I even celebrated Christmas over the Skype. Have you ever partied in Skype with friends? Drank beer or something? You did that? It's fun, but no fun. So I felt that lonely feeling again. For the second time, that was miserable. That was the worst 6 months in my life after those 3 years in Switzerland. So everything turned out well. And as you see in this picture, we went to Dubai as 4, came back as 5. This is the birth certificate of my daughter. My youngest one is born there. Everything was good. And even my youngest daughter, Kate, She's born in 4035, according to Islam calendar, which is a fun fact. So once we are at the topic of kids, the third piece of the story I would like to share regarding kids and how it makes sense for my whole idea beyond biohacking and quantified self. Who has kids here? Okay, those people that have children probably know the eyes of the children asking for Legos, for sweets, and all those kind of stuff. And they can be quite persuasive, and eventually sometimes you buy them those things. And these are the times when you decide it's better to go for minimalist lifestyle. So, but one thing their eyes actually don't lie is when you look in their eyes, when you put up the shoes before you go for, I don't know, evening training or something like that, when they ask you this question, Daddy, are you leaving this evening? And their eyes are totally different when they ask this question as opposed to buying new Lego friends. That's because all they ask are stuff, but all they need is being present, sharing love with them. So, and these are the things actually that are beyond biohacking and quantified self, which I would like to actually integrate into the biohacking movement in general. And I would call it, as opposed to quantified self, I would call it connectified self. And further, I will go deeper a little bit into the biology, evolutionary theory, why it makes sense to talk about those things. And don't get me wrong, I'm actually all about biohacking, self-improvement, attaching your head to the wires and neural feedback and doing this test and that test and measuring blood ketones and measuring sleep and lab tests or whatever. But besides that, which is very important, but besides that, there are very, very low-hanging fruit as well. In the sense that that can, by just doing few simple things, we can actually improve our health, our well-being to the highest heights. And that would address actually also the mental problems that we actually experience lately. The increasing rates of depression, the anxiety, and all the other mental illnesses, which could actually be addressed by the points that I'm going to share further. And the increasing rates of the loneliness. I was already explaining you about my personal story, but you also raised hands because you also sometimes experience loneliness. And not only old people are lonely, but also the young ones. Because these social networks that are supposed to be social, they actually create kind of fake social activity. And at the same time, people stay lonely. And also some studies show that loneliness can be actually quite a serious cause of mortality and bad health. And the loneliness, even if it's combined with drinking and eating too much, that is totally bad. I hope it's not air polluting. And by observing the longevity, the cases of longevity, when we look at the places where people live the longest, you probably are familiar with the blue zones concept. Are you? So this is a nice thing, and I'm not revealing something totally new, but also when you look at those common things that is typical for those villages where the high density of centurions live, one of the very important things is that they have a purpose for living. They live in a community, they have their self-worth attached to the lifestyle in general. Why is that people die or suddenly get bad health when they retire? when they quit working. It's because when you attach your value to the job that you are executing, you're doing, and all of a sudden you stop doing that, all of a sudden you kind of feel useless towards the society. And that makes people die. My father died at the age of 65, which actually quite good corresponds to the age when people retire. And belonging into the community, clubs, groups, things like that. This is all very typical for those people living in those blue zones. And if you try to combine and move naturally and have lunch eating together, that is actually quite an easy way. But so that it doesn't stay in the level of the psychology and so sort of emotional level, I actually want to address this thing also from the biology and biochemistry perspective. And this is about safety. You guys have heard today a lot about the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, this autonomous nervous system that drives our fight or flight reflexes and rest and digest when we want to feel kind of good. This is all about the safety. But there is one more level of this autonomic nervous system, which is actually developed by the scientist in the name of Stephen Porges. Have you heard of him? Well, actually quite an important guy in terms of this guy actually is the creator, or let's say he developed the idea of the heart rate variability. And you know heart rate variability as a measurement test. So this guy is the author of the idea, but he's also the author of the idea of the polyvagal theory, which says that not only we have the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest and digest, fight or flight, but also the shutdown and freeze mode, which is the most ancient regime that we can operate in. Like for instance, if a predator catches a prey, first, maybe the prey will be in the fight or flight mode, so it has a chance just to fight or maybe flee. But if it doesn't have any chance anymore, it goes into the shutdown mode, which means it can play dead, like cat catches the mouse, and mouse plays dead. Cat thinks, oh, it's dead, loses interest, gets distracted, turns away, mouse kind of relives again and flees off. That's the basic idea. But the problem is also that we live in a daily life when we have all those different stimuli from, I don't know, bus shouts, car traffic, and things like that. And as I say, it's an autonomous nervous system, so we cannot control that, and we get into this shutdown mode when our metabolism slows down, the emotions get slowed down, and we don't feel that good anymore. Our face expression is like numb and things like that. And that's where the depression comes in. This is the thing where people say, I know all the things that needs to be done in order to live healthy, but I cannot do anything. That's because they are in this shutdown mode. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what to do about that. And this explains how these mechanisms are built into us just to protect us. Our main goal in life is just to multiply, to spread our genes further. And in order to do that, we need to be safe at all times. So this mechanism is built for us just to survive, so that we can have sex, eat, and sleep. So, from an evolutionary perspective, it's actually just one example how that works and what we can implement in our daily life. Like for instance, here you can see this is our ear bone, and in mammals and human beings, this ear bone is detached from the skull. As opposed to reptilians, it's still attached to the skull, which means we can actually hear the highest frequency tones and the low frequency tones, where those reptilians hear only the low frequency tones, which is usually associated to the predator sound. What that means is that we can actually make us feel better, and again, it's all about the safety, all about the homeostasis of security. We always want to be in that state where we feel the most secure, and our nervous system thinks that. So, whenever we, like the monkeys, when they see the snake, all they do is predators don't hear that. Only other monkeys hear that. So, this high frequency tone is associated with a safety, or at least with a message of safety. So, actually, that works with the sound when we want to talk to our kids. That's why actually the ladies are a little bit better than the men talking to the small children, because they have higher pitch voices. And so, guys, if you want to make more connection to your children, just try to raise your voice a little bit, like, ah. You know, like the fairy tales, the angry wolf and the rabbit. So this works like that. So basically, all you need is talk in a high frequency voice, play some nice music, some healing sounds, and that works on the biological level. Of course, breathing, it's the connection with our nervous system. You can train your sympathetic nervous system, and also at the same time get yourself out of these freeze and shut down mode and being in uncomfortable situations. Do you think it's comfortable here? A common misconception is that those people that go into the cold water, they don't have cold. Far from truth. It's just a face for photo. So being comfortable with discomfort, that's what creates and gives you a new stimuli to your nervous system. And if you combine that with deep breathing, that creates a new neuronal pathways just to get yourself out of the shutdown mode, out of the free fight or flight mode. You know, also, we are creatures that for the several years before we grow up are totally dependent on other people. So that's how our nervous system is also connected to others, being always dependent on others. That's why we feel sometimes alone when we don't experience those human touches. That's why it's important to touch skin to skin. That's why I felt lonely when I was in Switzerland, because, letter, handwritten, no touching. So, and hugs. Have you heard about hugs? That it helps you release oxytocin? It's like the standard things already. But take 6 seconds to hug one another just to get your oxytocin, your happiness levels increase. And because that is like, oh, it's sweet. How does that relate to biohacking? You would ask. So I would say, the connection to others, please perceive that as a pill. Because biohackers use pills, right? Some supplements. So that's why I would treat the connection to other people, hugs, and all those emotional things as the supplements to your well-being on a daily basis. And preferably before mealtime. And because I realized that this connection thing, this is the picture where we are only 4, but we were actually 7 childhood friends who decided we turned 40 this year, and instead of doing the 40-year anniversary, we decided to go somewhere for a travel. So we went to Georgia. And we had some nice connection, even though we don't have much interest in common right now. But that was a good experience just to relive the childhood things and maybe find new connections along with gluten and beer. Sorry. And one of the last things that I want to say here is that also that what makes you come out of the shutdown modes is experience some kind of difficulty, of hardship. Actually, that explains why those things are very popular lately. You know, Spartan races, Ironmans, and things like that, because that makes you trigger your nervous system in a way that sometimes you feel stuck, which is this shutdown mode, and you start skydiving, bungee jumping, things like that. That you can explain that by just looking at this autonomous nervous system. What's also good, but maybe less related to connection and community building, is appreciation and being grateful for things. I heard a few times already today this thing, and if you cannot come up with these things for what you are grateful, then just imagine this picture and imagine what we have right now, and that time is operation without anesthesia. So at least this one, and what also you can see this community building. Maybe this picture is not that good, but also this is during the World War II in London subway station, and people actually experienced so much closeness because the hardship from the objective world actually make people more connected, because people feel again this childhood thing where you depend on others. And basically, if you look at the biology and biochemistry, there's this neurotransmitter which is called vasopressin. Have you heard of it? I mean, there are a few guys, specialists and experts, but this one is actually responsible for risking your life for the sake of others. This one explains why people are willing to go to war, to defend your country, why you would step into the fight just to protect your family, and things like that. So basically, this is the ultimate social neurotransmitter. And this gets released when we are being together with other people. And this picture is from the January 1991 in Riga. And that very same thing happened also in Lithuania and in Estonia as well. That was the time where people just sat at the fireplace, shared soup, tea, and just stood there and actually were ready to go against the tanks just to protect and build a new country. So this is just a nice examples how not on the emotional level, but actually on the biochemistry level, these things work. So, and ultimately, what we decided in Riga, in Latvia, just to create for us this purpose, this huge goal, the mission, because we know those things are important in our biochemistry, but also in general to communicate to other people, is by the year 2035, we decided, meaning me and the biohacking community, we decided we want Latvia to become #1 European happiest country according to World Happiness Index. So, and this is now our goal as a biohackers. Goal in and of itself is actually quite nice to have, right? Even if we don't succeed, still nice, worthwhile pursuing. But what we imagine actually that under this goal, many other communities and people would subscribe and bring the whole society together. That's why we decided to do that. And we do it by organizing conference, different meetups. We already have the biohacking conference in April this year, and we will have the next one April next year. We aim to do that as the biggest biohackers conference in the Baltic countries. So this is how we plan to stay connected, to be connected. And actually, I encourage you also to be and stay connected now and forever. Thank you very much.
Hey.
And you can hug. You can hug each other.
Thank you, my friend. What do you think about using sticks for children? You know, isn't
Conditioning.
tempting
Conditioning.
sometimes? Yeah, conditioning. Imagine like schools used to have these things like, hey, behave. So I think it's very important to bring the social aspect to it. Like often we are too focused on ourselves, and it's in the end it's loneliness and lack of connection and all of that that can also kill you in the end. So thank you very much for bringing that really important aspect into this conference. So awesome. Thank you, Kasper.
And thank you for all of you too. Applause to yourself.
Cool.